So you may have missed it, but in October of this year, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, issued its report as a part of the follow-up to the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015. The report is a collaborative report. It's the result of over 100 of the top climate scientists in the world giving their opinion about the latest research, and it was extensively peer-reviewed and vetted, of course, prior to its publication. And this last week, as nations around the world gathered in Poland to discuss rulemaking for emissions and the next steps, this report was front and center. And the report's alarming. The report states that we have about 12 years. We have about 12 years to turn things around when it comes to carbon emissions at our current level of releasing of those emissions, before temperatures rise 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is a level of warming that will be catastrophic for human populations around the world and for plant and animal life as we know it. We are already in our community feeling the effects of climate change and global warming. The wildfires and the debris flow have revealed to us personally and collectively just how vulnerable we truly are. And it has revealed to us the reality and the promise of collective response in ways that are positive. Couple, though, these changes in our environment with the current rumblings in our democratic structure, and many of us find ourselves daily in a state of heightened anxiety. And it's difficult to know how to address this anxiety when collectively it seems that the way to be present with it is to get more information and to participate in that. But I'd like to suggest this morning that actually there are some alternative strategies that may be more effective for us to be able to collectively move forward in positive, collaborative, and peaceful ways. So this context that we're currently in is certainly not the context that many of us expected to be engaged in our adult lives. It certainly isn't the context that I imagined would be present for my children who are 16 and 13 to come of age in. In 12 years, my son will be 25, just starting his life. And I don't know what that life is going to look like. I don't know what the environment is he's going to be in. And certainly this wasn't the context that I imagined when I imagined and heard the call to ministry. This isn't the context that I wanted to serve in, though I suspect that most of us, when we find and respond to our calling, find that the work we actually do is different than what we imagined we would be doing. And so we adapt. Just like we are working very hard as communities and as states and as nations to adapt and to shift. There is, I think, despite all of that, great reason to have hope. That's been my inquiry this last year as I wind my way through this, is what is it to have hope in the midst of this tremendous amount of turmoil and churn and anxiety? What does hope look like? What is the shape of hope? Does it have a fragrance? Does it have a color associated with it? What is it to have hope? Real hope, not the kind of hope that is, oh, well, I just hope something will magically happen out there in the world. I'm talking about the real hope. The real hope. I think there is real reason to have that real hope because numbers do not lie. Yes, the 12 years is a scary kind of number, but there are a lot of other numbers as well. Solar is dropping in price, and the collective response by scientists and activists and entrepreneurs and financial houses is resoundingly determined and focused, and frankly, largely unconcerned about the naysayers. But we have to stay focused. We have to stay focused. The question is, how do we stay focused? How do we become more skillful in our responses? And how do we do that as an already progressive and liberal community? Because one of the things I notice about those of us in liberal, progressive communities, be that politically or just theologically liberal, is that we can at times become a bit like an echo chamber unto ourselves. And so my message to you this morning is, let's figure out how to not only break those habits of anxiety that are maybe supported by Twitter feeds, but how also do we break that habit of creating anxiety because we are collectively circling our own wagons around one another? Because we're not going to get through that in a silo. We're only going to get through that collectively. So Andres Miguel Rondon, who's a Venezuelan-born and raised author who lives in Madrid, wrote an article in the Caracas Chronicles in January 2017, in which he provided some insight and I think some effective strategies for us to consider as we move forward in this context. In 2017, he counseled Americans about how to avoid the same mistakes that liberals in his country were making under the regime of Chavez. He outlined 4 strategies for resisting what he calls the pull of populism that can lead to fascism. And in reviewing his article, now 2 years into our current administration, I noticed that as liberals, while we are working very hard to overcome our challenges, we are also still prone to some of those same mistakes that he outlined. So here are his 4 suggestions for how to get out of that echo chamber. 1, he says, do not forget who the enemy is. The enemy is not your fellow human being. The enemy is the fear and anxiety within yourself. The enemy is the reality of climate change. The enemy is the hiding. It is the avoiding. The only part of the enemy that is between humans is the part in which we strip the humanity away from the other human being that we are in relationship with. The second is show no contempt. The third is don't force someone out. And the fourth is find a counterargument. So let's start again. What does it mean to not forget who the enemy is? In our communities, we can spend a lot of time liberal shaming one another. Who is more woke than the other? Who has the right language? Who has the right amount of things on their calendar? None of that matters. None of that matters. It matters who you are, and it matters how you spend your time. So I encourage you to not, when you find yourself, I know I'm very guilty of this, talking to my partner especially, we can go off into a wild idea about who those other people are. Miguel Rondon says, stop. Stop and listen. Remember that the other person wants the same things often that you want. They want a good job. They want a safe community. They want to be able to live and worship as they see fit. They want the right to be different. When we continue, though, to participate in those conversations in which we start to think, but facts, the facts matter, we start to lose sight of the fact, the real fact, that it's really the humanity that matters underneath. When we participate in the facts, we actually can play into the very caricature that we're trying to avoid. The idea that somehow we are out of touch and privileged folks, overeducated, who are determined to espouse our brand of liberalism onto everyone around us. That's not what we're about as a movement of Unitarian Universalism. We're really about the worth and dignity of every person. We're about allowing all of us to find and stand within our own theological space, with dignity and respect. And we are called to respect and to honor all of the sources across the spectrum and to work within our democratic structures. When we don't participate, when we avoid that, we can often commit the same sin that drove us, some of us, initially to Unitarian Universalism communities. Some of us came to these doors because we were tired of being told how to be, who to be, and what to believe. We have to guard against that very same tendency once we arrive in a home that feels welcoming to us. And this leads to that second suggestion. He wrote, show no contempt. Hold the humanity. Hold your humanity and hold that of another. It's a bit tricky, I know, but contempt has a very specific signature, right? It has a lip curl and an eye roll. Contempt is very easy to communicate to another person unwittingly. And people know instantly when you don't have respect for them. So we have to avoid and train ourselves because it's so easy, of course. It's so easy to fall into that because we're terrified about 12 years passing and what is the environment going to look like? And we think we don't have time. You have to change, but that's not going to change. So the better process to do, or the better practice to follow, is to be aware of that for yourself and then walk away. You don't need to engage with every naysayer. You just need to move forward. Stay focused and do the work that you're called to do in the world. The third suggestion was don't force someone out. Don't force them out of your community, and don't force them out of office. That's a distraction. Stay in the democratic process. Our midterm elections brought good news and some news that other people were unfortunately not happy with. That's part of the process. Celebrate the things that brought forth more justice. Celebrate the things that allowed you also to see where you need to work more. Our communities are here to be the harbingers of justice and of love. We're not about winning or losing elections. We're about pushing forth our values of love, justice, respect, dignity, and worth for every human being. And that means even the ones we disagree with. Last, find a counter-argument, he wrote. The problem is not the message, it's the messenger. Understand that vilifying you is much easier than grappling with the real challenges that are in our path. 12 years is a very short amount of time. I know we can do it if we work together. We have to avoid wasting our energy on anything that doesn't matter. We need to be able to prove and to argue that everyone here is American in exactly the same way. We all belong. It doesn't matter if you're red or blue or purple or something in between. It doesn't matter if you are young or old. What matters is how you show up and how you respect and honor the diversity of everyone that comes into interaction with you. We need to start changing the conversation. We are all American. We are all American in the same way. These 4 suggestions, these 4 calls to be effective and focused, I think are part and parcel of what Mark Nepo was talking about in his reflection about the salmon. The salmon do not waste their time resisting the resistance. They don't resist the fact that there are waterfalls. They don't resist the fact that at the bottom of the waterfall, it's a cold and churny mess. They just accept that this is the reality that they are in right now. and they trust their experience. They know, because they have gone past other waterfalls, that on the other side of the waterfall, there are places of rest and renewal before they get to the next challenge. The salmon do not complain about the reality of waterfalls or how many times they've been washed back down to the bottom of that waterfall, and gosh darn it, they have to climb it up again, and they stick together. They focus on the goal and they trust the process. Mark Nepo wrote that what the salmon somehow know is how to turn, as I said to the children, how to turn their underside from center to tail into the powerful current coming at them. And it hits them squarely on the most vulnerable part. And the impact launches them out and further up the waterfall. From a distance, it looks quite magical. But in reality, they are at one with their element. They know how to turn towards the pain, how to turn towards vulnerability with intentionality. They're not putting themselves out there so they can get beaten up. They're not engaging in useless arguments about facts and figures. They're turning towards the resistance and moving forward. They're staying focused. They're being skillful, and they're being honest. Deep inside their body, they somehow know that by doing this, they will propel themselves forward towards their destination. I think we can learn a lot from them. That if we too can learn to turn towards the resistance that is in front of love and justice and worth and dignity, that we too can remember that we far outnumber those of us that are not about love and justice. And I would in fact argue that there are very few Americans that don't want love and justice. They may have a different interpretation of exactly what that looks like, but again, we mostly want the same things. We just have different experiences, and we come to the conversation from that different set of experiences. We are all swimming in that river, both the red salmon and the blue salmon. We are all swimming in that same river, and the river is wide. And we are all going on the same journey. We may get there differently, and I know you're probably thinking, what about that one picture with the bear that scoops the salmon out, and that's kind of scary. Yeah, that happens too. But we can do this. We're strong, we're collective. We can stay focused on the goal, for we're not done swimming yet. The river is wide, the journey is full of challenges, but we are not done swimming yet. We will suffer some results of climate change and global warming. We already have, and we will continue to do that. We are going to figure it out. What we cannot allow is the turmoil and the churn to distract ourselves. We need to focus on that larger goal, the wide and open sea that we are either swimming to or the river that we are swimming back to, depending on what end of the metaphor you want to be in today. We just need to remember that we are all swimming in the same river. We are all on the same planet. We're all earthlings. And we all have a vested interest in the earth being able to support our lives. Angela Herrera wrote again in that poem this morning, Ni modo. Ni modo. It doesn't matter that the water is churny. It doesn't matter that you feel tired. You are okay. There is a calmer and stiller water on the edge, on the beyond of this next waterfall. I know this is a giant waterfall, this 12 years. Think about the fish jumping those 12 feet. 12 years, 12 feet. We got to jump 500 feet. We're only going to be able to do that if we remember to turn towards and to trust that as others of us also turn towards, we will get through. We will get up, we'll get over the waterfall into that calmer water. One of my colleagues back east in Chicago wrote a wonderful poem that he posted on Earth Day of last year. And I'd like to share it with you. And I think it really calls us to that place where we are collectively together. He wrote, "In these times, we are called." And I want you to imagine that he's calling us to our principles and our values as Unitarian Universalists. We are called, he writes, to step into the mess and the murk of life. We are called to be strong and vulnerable, called to console and to challenge, called to be grounded and hold lofty ideals, and called to love in the face of hate. We are called, and it's not easy. And we will not always agree, and we will yell and scream and cry, and we will laugh and smile and sing. We are called to be together. There's so much work to do, and we cannot do it alone. We need one another, holding each other accountable to our covenants, to the holy, to love, and to justice. And in these times, we are called. So I'm calling you. I'm calling you to be who you are, fully and resplendently yourself, and to step into the churn of the water and to climb those waterfalls with me. The river is wide, and we have some work to do. I'm calling you. So may it be so, and may we swim onward with courage and vulnerability. Amen.